we're sort of getting an overview of the various shitot with regard to Daled Kosos and the distinction between Shason Chai and Shason Bevasachas. So what we're studying right now is the joint shita, the Rif and the Rambam. And that you'll see here on page Yud Tes in the Amudei Hod on the right column, which is Os He. And we're talking about a hybrid mitzvah in Daled Kosos that has two dimensions. And that's pretty much true according to all the various shitos. There are two dimensions to Daled Kosos, but what are those? How do I identify those two dimensions? Now, in the frame of reference of the Rif and the Rambam, what we have here is, number one, he calls it Hora al Daled Kosos Chalukim, where the four kosos are separate one from the other. And that's critical because the number 4 is a secret number that parallels the 4 kosos shel geula, the 4 lashonos of geula. So he says the following, with regard to that dimension of 4 kosos chalukim, it's irrelevant whether it's yayin mozug or yayin chai, because in both cases, even in the case of yayin chai, it is yayin, it constitutes yayin. So he is drinking 4 kosos, and he separates these kosos. Now we'll see in a minute exactly how he achieves the goal of separating the kosos by contrasting it with a case where he does not separate the kosos, which is called shason v'vasachas. But the second dimension, above and beyond the number 4, which is 4 kosos, is what we call cherus. And here, the quality of the yayin becomes critical. Yayin mozug, yes, that's considered kiyum cherus. Yayin chai, no. So in this case, where he drank yayin chai, he has 4 kosos chalukim, and he drank them separately, each kos unto itself. But the problem was that he forgoes the kiyum of cherus insofar as he drank them chai and not mozuk. So if we compare the two, if he drank 4 kosos bevasachas, but they were yayin mozuk, so he obtains the kiyum of Daled Kosos of Horas Cherus, and he has demonstrated Cherus, but on the other hand, he doesn't have Daled Kosos Chalukos to parallel the Daled Lishonos Shel Geula. On the other hand, if he's got Daled Kosos Chalukos, but it's Yayin Chai and not Yayin Mozug, although he obtains the Kiyum of Horas Cherus of Daled Kosos Chalukim, Keneged Daled Lishonos Shel Geula, but he forfeits the Kiyum of Shtia Derech Cherus, which is called Yayin, which requires Yayin Mozug. Now, what is Bivasachas? What does it mean that he failed to separate the Kosos? What is that?
Rev, let me ask you a quick question.
Sure.
I think we had a sheet that said that the 4 kosot have to be 4 kosot chalukot have to be like 4 kalim, right? And it can't be that you have a big kli that has the kamut of 4 kosot together, right? So is that a chiluk for everybody, or only by certain deos that we have here?
That's very good.
I'm trying to recall because I think we mentioned it.
Right. On this point that you're asking about, the Amudei Hod vacillates. He offers 2 possibilities. If you take a look inside, when he mentions that second requirement of 4 kosos chalukim as a hora on cherus, on the 4 lashonos of cherus of geula, he says the following, that if he drank 4 kosos bevasachas, but he drank them mozug, then he does achieve one element of cherus, and that's called yayin. Yayin meaning that's the way I demonstrate cherus. However, he drank the bavasachas. And here we can wonder what exactly bavasachas means. One possibility, he says, is kos achas kirashi. He poured 4 cups into 1 kos. So he drank from 1 kos. And clearly, by drinking from 1 kos, he doesn't have 4 koses chalukim. There are no separate 4 kosos. So clearly, he forfeits that kiyum of the horas cherus of dalid kosos. He has, on the other hand, achieved one element of cherus, namely because he drank yayin mazu. But now he offers another possibility in the Rambam. The Rambam doesn't really spell it out and tell us what vasachas means. So here we can introduce Rabbeinu David, who says that vasachas means that he drank 4 separate kosos, but without any hefsek bracha between 1 kos and the other. So basically, he drank 4 consecutive kosos without a bracha separating each kos. So that in the second interpretation, it's not enough that you drink 4 kosos from 4 different cups or glasses, but the glasses and the drinking has to be separated one from the other. And the halacha jumps in and sets up an objective halachic standard or requirement to separate 1 kos from the other. And what has to wedge in between each kos? It's its own bracha. So you have first bracha, second, etc., and each bracha will serve to separate the kos from the next kos. So he makes a bracha, drinks the kos, and now he gets to another bracha and sets up a second kos. So we really don't know, at the end of the day, what is the exact mitzius of shesan v'vasachas, according to the Rambam and the Rif. It might be that he poured them all into 1 kos like Rashi, so he really only drank from 1 kos. But had he separated the kosos into 4 physical cups, then he would have achieved the kosos chalukim and the horah of the dalid kosos, which is keneged dalid l'shon shel geula. But that's not necessarily so, and it could very well be that separating into 4 cups and drinking them consecutively one after the other would not set up dalid kosos chalukim, but rather bracha separates it. And I was wondering why. What would be the logic that? Are we okay, Adam? Oh.
Yeah, no, but I want to ask you because the thing is, if you're saying like achila, how do I know that I drank 4 cups instead of 3 cups, 4 cups instead of 2 cups? So fine, I turned all the pages in my Haggadah and I got to the point where it said make a bracha and I made a bracha. But if we're trying to say to maybe save the avad case where somebody got excited and he drank all the 4 kosot and he even made brachot on them, that's maybe it's fine between the first kos and the second kos, but the third kos, the bracha is Borei Pri Hagafen. Isn't it Borei Pri Hagafen, or is it the?
No, the third kos is Birkat Hamazon.
Well, but so the bracha of that kos is the Borei Pri Hagafen after Birkat Hamazon.
Not necessarily. I would say the Borei Pri Hagafen serves a different function, and that is what we call a Birchas HaNehenim. Has nothing to do with Cherus. The bracha of Cherus is, believe it or not, Birkat Hamazon.
Okay, what I would have expected then is that I'm benching because it's time to bench, and then I'm benching all a kos because that's meshubach or minumavchar, and then I'm saying Borei Pri Hagafen, and that's the bracha on the third kos. But you're saying the 4 brachot of Birkat Hamazon are actually
right.
Okay, so I wasn't ready for that.
Now, the reason Birkat Hamazon is different on this night than on any other occasion during the year when I eat a meal and I have to bench is because the Birkat Hamazon mentioning Yetziat Mitzrayim now gets woven into the fabric of Cherus. And so that this Birkat Hamazon is different. We could ask a Manishtana Birkat Hamazon v'layla hazeh mikol shar haleilot. And the answer is that this bracha of Birkat Hamazon, insofar as it reflects the Yetzias Mitzrayim, and you could go even a step further, the Seudah itself is integrated into the fabric of Yetzias Mitzrayim and Cherus. We eat the maror and we eat the matzah, and we whatever your minig is as far as eating other parts, the beitza and the karpas and so forth. Whatever you eat in the framework of that seuda transforms that Suda into a Sudas Cherus. So the Birkas Hamazon is attached to that Suda and takes on that special status of Cherus. And now we have a third bracha, which is in this case Birkas Hamazon, that organizes a separation between the second kos and the third kos. And then after that we get to
someone who benched, he didn't say Borei Pri Agafen before drinking the third kos, made a bracha on that kos with
Correct.
respect to the kosos,
right? And he would be Yotzei is mitzvah daled kosos, yeah. Okay.
Is that a Gemara and I just didn't realize it?
Well, I don't know if it's an explicit Gemara. I think it's the idea that's being brought out here by the Ram and the Rif that that the whole structure of the Haggadah with the daled kosos is built around these four brachos.
And the third one is benching. It's not.
It's Birkas Hamazon, right. Okay. Now he points out here in this paragraph that the Rif and the Rambam, in their text of the Gemara, it says Sheson v'vasachas yidei cheres yotza, yidei daled kosos lo yotza. Well, let's try to see how we're going to read this girsa according to the Ram and the Rif. In the case of Vasachas, Yidei Cherus Yotza. Now, what's Yidei Cherus? But we're going to have to push into this girsa that Yidei Cherus is that extra kiyum through Yayin Mazug of Yidei Cherus. But Yidei Daled Kosos Lo Yotza, meaning Daled Kosos, each one is a separate kos, because he drank them all from one, or without any brachas separating them, so he doesn't have Kosos Nifrados, and therefore he forfeits the mitzvah of daled kosos. So again, physically he drank 4 kosos, if you hold like the second shot of Rabbeinu David and assume that the Rambam accepted that. He did physically drink 4 kosos, but because there were no brachos separating each one of these brachos from the next one, it's as if he had drunk from one kos. And at the end of the day, he doesn't have 4 kosos. So Yedei daled kosos lo yotza. What does he fulfill? He fulfills the mitzvah of cherus. And the mitzvah of cherus is fulfilled because the yayin is yayin mazug, and he drank, in fact, 4 cups of yayin mazug. However,
may I ask, would it be possible to fulfill the mitzvah of cherus by drinking yayin mazug in less than 4 cups?
I don't think so. I think you're requiring 4 cups of yayin mazug. That's what he's saying over here. So therefore he says the following. Right? Because he has yayin mazug and he has 4 kosos, so he does have that element of horas dalid kosos shel cherus, because he drank 4 kosos. Physically, he drank 4 kosos. Or if you go like Rashi, he drank the kamios of 4 kosos, meaning the volume of 4 kosos. But lo kiyem din, he didn't fulfill the rav shesias dalid kosos chalukos, which, as we said, indicates a special hora that is achieved through the number 4, setting up 4 separate kosos connected the 4 lashonos of geula, and that's sheson v'vasachas. Now we get to sheson chai, and here the girsa of the Ram and the Rif is Yidei Daled Kosos Yotza, which is beautiful, because in fact he did drink 4 Kosos Chalukos. So therefore it makes sense to say Yidei Daled Kosos Yotza, whereas in the case earlier of Shom Vasachas, we said that Yidei Daled Kosos Lo Yotza. Very sharp. Now the girsa is very clear. Yidei Cherus Lo Yotza. Why? Because he drank Yayin Chai, and if he drank Yayin Chai, he cannot achieve that Cherus of Yayin. Again, he has a different Cherus of 4 kosos, each one separate from the other, each one embellished by its own unique respective bracha, together with a number 4 that reflects the Dal Lashon Shel Gula. So that much he has achieved, even within the context of Cherus, because he has 4 separate Kosos. But what dimension of Cherus did he not achieve? That's the Yayin of the Cherus. The Yayin for the Cherus, not the 4 cups, is a requirement of Yayin Mazug, which he didn't drink. And that's what he says here. Shekiyam es din horosh dias dalid kosos chaluko shevidalid kosos, that he has, because each kos has its own separate bracha. But lokiyam es din horosh acheres shevidalid kosos, I think I would add the word shel yayin, of yayin mazug. Umashmol sarifa ramam shekol echad min adinim ma'akev ubechiser echad mem yitzorch lachzav v'lishtos. Okay, this is very, very important, this last postscript, but it's not really a postscript. It's almost captures the essence of the unique shita of the Rif Rambam. Because what we're saying now is that these are 2 different dimensions. Each one is an independent kiyum that has to be achieved. So you have the kiyum of Daled Kosos Chalukos, which we said was Horas Cherus of Daled Lashon Shel Gula. You have the kiyum of Cherus Shel Yayin, which means Yayin Mazug. And in each case, he's missing one or the other. And he's going to have to repeat the shtia of that kos, or for that matter, of all 4 kosos, in order to achieve that element. So, for example, the simple way of just 1 second, Adam, because I'm going to lose my trend. The simple way of understanding this would be, in the case of Yain Chai, that he will have to drink now another 4 kosas of Yain, because he drank Chai. Again, he achieved the number 4, and it could be that we'll be more lenient with regard to the Chai, and we're not going to require that he repeat brachos and separate the kosos, because that he already achieved on the first round when he drank yain chai. But now that he's drinking yain mazug, he's going to have to drink 4 kosos of yain mazug in order to achieve yain shel cherus. So again, just to emphasize this, I can't overemphasize that according to the Ram and the Riv, these 2 dimensions that overlap really are separate, independent. They happen to overlap, but each one is a machayev unto itself. So you can have 4 kosos of separate kosos chalukos for that achievement of cherus. Even in a case of yain chai, you could have 1 kos, but achieve cherus of yain, meaning of yain chai, as long as you drank physically 4 kosos, even though they're not 4 separate kosos. And in both cases, you're going to have to repeat. Yeah, Adam.
I was gonna say is if he drank mazug but bas achas, then he only really has to drink another 3 kosas, because surely he was yotze by 1 of them.
That is true. If he drank mazug, so that although he drank all 4 kosos, well, let me just, I just want to add 1 point here, which I'm sure you had in mind, but I just want to emphasize it, that whatever kos he drank, and he drank it chai, but he did make a bracha on that kos. Do you follow my point? In other words, if you want to achieve 1 out of the 4, then that 1 has to be a kos chaluka, meaning a kos that has its own personality and independence. So it's going to have to be attached to 1 bracha. If, let's say, he would make bar pri agafen and drink 4 kosas one after the other consecutively, and they're all yayin mazug, he would have to drink another 4 kosos al seder brachos, because he doesn't even have 1 kos with a bracha attached to it.
Let's say it was kiddush.
Right, I'm assuming he made kiddush, so then you're okay. But
I'm
just saying, in theory, if he would pour 4 kosos, forget about kiddush, garnished, he didn't say a word, and now he makes bar pri agafen and he drinks them one after the other in a zip line, and each one is mazug, he will have achieved a kiyum of cherus without daled kosos. Not even 1 out of the 4.
You don't think he's makayim 1 kos according to the shita?
I don't think so, because there's no kos that's separated from the other kosos. So you don't even have 1 out of 4.
I don't
you don't even have 1 out of 4.
Right? But I think you're saying that a kos that's not like moil for a flashem, or that doesn't have chalo shem kos, I don't want to, okay, then it counts as 0. But I'm saying, fine, why not just be mitzaref to 1?
because again, you've got 4 kosos that he drank one after the other. So we combine them, and there's no kos chaluka. You need at least 1 kos chaluka to get 1 out of the 4. He doesn't even have 1 kos chaluka. He's got he's got a potpourri of 4 kosos that are all integrated into 1. I don't think he has even 1 kos, because there's no single kos that's chaluka. Not 1 kos got a bracha. He didn't even recite. He was so stingy. He didn't even recite kiddush on 1 kos.
No, so let's say he's sitting at your house for Seder. You make kid and you put in front of everybody 4 kosod, okay? And so he hears kiddush, and he knows on Pesach I'm supposed to drink 4 kosod. So he thinks that he drinks them all together now. He's Yotze of Kiddush, and why doesn't he have 1 kos plus that, and the other 3 are just mitzaref to the first one? In other words, if he stopped at 1, then that's 1, right? So why does the fact that he added 3 more kosot to it, which each could have been ruyot for their own, at the time, why does that pull the first kos out of kiyum of kos rishon? I don't see.
And again, he didn't recite kiddush.
Okay.
I'm asking. I just want to get your case. If he didn't recite kiddush, then you can't pull 1 kos out of the 4 because they're all identical and they all were drunk.
Right. So I understood that he drank 4 on the kiddush, rather than that he drank 4 for stam.
Right. Oh, okay, fine. Then in that case, I have no debate with you. He certainly.
Okay. I didn't even imagine that we would have somebody that's like.
No question about that. Right.
Right.
Okay, then.
Rav Velvel?
Rav Velvel. Now, Rav Velvel has a different understanding of the Rambam. And although, again, he's still operating with this concept of a hybrid or an overlap of 2 kiyumim that coexist in Daled Kosos, but it's a different approach. He's got the following 2 dinim. The first din is what he calls shtias yayin, and that refers to yayin mozug and shalo al seder. So he's got yayin mozug, has nothing to do with the brachos, the haggadah, or any sort of seder. Now, if he drinks 4 kosas consecutively, then according to the Brisker Rav, it still is yayin mazuk. And if it's still yayin mazuk, then he does have derech cherus. He does have derech cherus. But now he has a second din, which you'll see on the top of the left column here, and that's amiras haggadah ala kos. And the emphasis here sort of shifts from cherus to the haggadah itself, so that it's not the way we said it until now, that sheson vasachas, he forfeits an element of cherus, which is keneged the Arba Lashonos of Geula, because he didn't have Kosos Chalukos. That's not what's going on in the Brisker Rav. In the Brisker Rav's understanding of the Rambam, what's going on is that you have to be Makayim Dalid Koso. I'm sorry, start again. That you have to be Makayim Dalid Brachos. Each bracha generates a cost, but that's because of the bracha. So it's a matter of where you start and where you end. Until now, we started with Dalid Kosos. But we had a problem because he didn't separate the kosos. So he didn't have kosos chalukos. He's starting with dalid brachos and ending up with dalid kosos. And the kos really is secondary and subjugated to or bows down to the bracha on that kos. And the ikar is the bracha, not the kos. We thought it's all a matter of different dimensions of the mitzvah of dalid kosos. You have the cherus of yayin mozug, you have the cherus of dalid kosos chalukos. No. The Brisker Rav says he's not going on that line of reasoning. He's talking about the amiras haggadah, which constitutes 4 different brachos, and each bracha generates its own costs. As far as cherus is concerned, drink 4 cups of yayin mozug. I don't care whether you drank them with the brachos or without the brachos. in a certain sense, the Brisker Rav is separating these two dinim even further apart than we did, than the original understanding. But in doing so, he sort of reduced the Dalit Kosos almost to a non-set, because what does he have for Dalit Kosos? All he has is really Dalit Brachos. Look at
it sounds to me like it's a better reading in the Rambam than it is in the Gemara.
The problem is that we, as we discussed last week, that the Rambam in Halacha Tes, he hasn't even mentioned when you're supposed to drink the Dalit Kosos. He hasn't even given us the presentation of the Dalit Brachos. And again, already he's talking about Shasam Vasachas. Well, according to Brisker Rav, you can't talk about Shasam Vasachas until you first establish these 4 brachos. The whole Seder of the Rambam.
While we're talking, it's Hilchot Shmane. I'm sorry, it's Chametzu Matzah, right?
Right.
Do you remember the parak?
It's either Zayin or Ches. Let me just think. Which parak? I think it's Zayin. Starts with Mitzva Sasei L'Saper. Is that parak Zayin?
I'll find it now that you.
I'm sorry. I'm at loss here because I don't have access to Svarim here. I just have what
I'm looking up on Sfaria. It's not so like
okay. No, if you have the Rambam in front of you, take a look at Perek Zayin and Perek Ches. I think Perek Zayin starts with Mitzvah Sasei L'Saper B'Yitzias Mitzrayim or something along that line.
I'll find it in just a second here.
Okay.
Yeah, Zion is mitzvah shel Torah seper b'nitzim u'neflaos.
Mitzvah shel Torah, sorry. Mitzvah shel Torah, l'saper b'nitzim u'neflaos, shenasu l'avoseinu v'lonu, v'leil chamisha sar b'nisan. Something
right.
like
Halacha chet is a few anishu b'Yisrael, and then tet is arba kosot elu tzarich limzog otan. I can share it on the screen. Do you want to look also?
No. I'm following you. Halacha Tes, that's the one we want.
Right. Arba kosot elu tzarich limzog otan kedei shetiyeh shtia areva hakol lefi yayin u'lefi dara shotet. V'lo yifchot ba'arbatan mervi yayin chai. Okay. So the yayin chai b'toch kol arba kos has to be revius. So you take revius of yayin chai and then you are rev more than revius.
Right. Three revios of yayin. So you end up with a full shear, which is made up of 4 revios.
Right. Shata arba kosot elu miyayin she'enu mezug yatsa yedei arba kosot v'lo yatsa yedei cherut. Shata arba kosot mezugin b'vat achat yedei cherut yatsa yedei arba kosot lo yatsa. Ve'im shata mikol kotz mehen rubo yatsa.
So just backtrack again. If he just the last few words in the Rambam.
Ve'im shata mikol kotz mehen rubo.
No, right before that. I'm sorry.
Shata arba kosot mizugin b'vat achat.
Excellent. Slow down. Mizugim. So he's got the derech cherus that the Rambam had stipulated in the previous sentence. But now what happened? Mizugin, but bivasachas, correct?
Nachon. Yedei cherut yatsa, yedei arba kosot lo yatsa.
But now here's where we have 2 definitions of the Rambam. One approach to the Rambam is that he doesn't have 4 kosos chalukim zemizeh, so he doesn't have that secret magic number 4, which triggers off a hora of geula. That's one interpretation of the Rambam. And that means that the mitzvah of Daled Kosos is made up of 2 parts, both of which are trying to demonstrate or remind us of geula. One is the yayin mozug, which is derech cherus, and the other is 4 kosos chalukim keneged the dal l'shonos of geula. That's one interpretation. Now we have another interpretation, which is the Brisker Rav, and he's saying that the problem with Shasam Vasachas is that he doesn't have the Amiras HaGod al Akos, the Amir of the 4 brachos, but the Rambam has not yet presented to us those 4 brachos.
I'll read you halacha yud,
Mhm.
and it doesn't sound to me like I'm not sure where the brisker Rav would be coming from, because if the well, I'll read it and then I'll tell you why I'm wondering about the brisker Rav there. He says the Rambam kol kos v'kos me'arba kosot halalu mevarech alav bracha b'fnei atzma v'kos rishon omer alav kiddush hayom kos sheni koreh alav et haggadah kos shlishi mevarech alav birkat hamazon. So that's like we're the question that I had before. Kos Revi'i Gomer Alav et Halal Umevrech Alav Birkat Hashir Uvein HaKosot Elu Im Ratzal Ishtot
Okay, wait a minute,
Shavtet.
wait. There's too much, Adam. If you keep going in this Rambam, we're going to be here till Mashiach comes for sure. Hopefully, he'll come soon. But
Maybe
the
we can take a
point
break for a
is,
little better.
the point of the Amudei Hod, and again, like I told you, I think a few weeks ago, to take on the Brisker Rov is like, really heavy hitting here. And he's saying that according to Brisker Rov, the whole Seder of the Rambam, and the Rambam is known and he's famous for his organizational skills. Nobody has to give the Rambam accolades for his meticulous organization and the sequence. There's something out of order over here. Halacha Yud belongs somewhere earlier, before at least the last half of Halacha Tes, in which the Rambam says Shesam Vasachas Lo Yatza.
For next week, can I just ask you if we could see the brisker Rav inside, because it's
right.
not
So for
obvious to
that,
me.
I think what you're going to need, I don't know if they have it on Bari Lan.
So okay, so well, if we have a week, we can find it. But
Another time, I think, because I don't know if you'll be able to get it up on Bari Lan. I can share with you the Brisker Rav on Hanukkah, because our friend Howie Meisel already has prepared those pages and sent it to me for the Thursday night Breslev to Brisk to Breslev shir, if you know what I mean. But that's a different Brisker Rav. That's a Brisker Rav on
we were in front
Hanukkah.
of the other two, I wouldn't say this, but since it's you and I about Hanukkah, I borrowed a Rav Asher Weiss on the Moedim about Hanukkah, and he brought a levush that I had not heard before. And levush says that the Hashmad and the Xera of Purim was physical, and it didn't have a spiritual
Oh,
component
right.
as
That's a
well.
famous Bush, right?
Right, and so the mitzvah is shtia and simcha, and on the opposite, that that Hanukkah, that
Hanukkah
was
is all
only
about spirituality, and therefore,
so and so that's why the mitzvah of Achila or of Suda Hanukkah is only a Rishud. I never heard it so.
right. That's Levush, Rav Mordechai Yaf, very, very famous Levush. Yeah. What else? So now we're up to the rush. So let's see if we can. I'm looking. I think we have a few more minutes. You'll let me know if you have to go right away, and we can fit in the rush, which is Zion. Now, the rush here is an integration of two of his works. One of his works is a tshuva, which we saw already in the past, Siman Chafei, and the other is the rush here in his work on Arvei Pesachim, and that's Siman Chafal. Now, this is a long paragraph that takes up most of the left column on page Yutes. But what I really want to do is press the return button and in the middle of this paragraph and set up two parts and two separate paragraphs, because I think that would make it easier. Again, I can't press the return button, obviously, on a printed page, but I'm going to note where I think we should really sort of end one paragraph so that we could begin another paragraph. Okay. We're going to talk first about Sheson Chai. And it says the following. This is line 4. Sheson Chai, Yidei Dalid Kosos Yotza, Yidei Cheres Lo Yotza. So we have to keep that in mind. So what does it mean when it says, according to the Rosh, Yidei Dalid Kosos Yotza? And the answer is quite straightforward. He made a separate bracha on each kos. And that means that each kos that he drank fulfilled its purpose of drinking that recitation, so to speak, drinking on that recitation of that particular bracha. And that's what he calls Yedei Daled Kosos Yotza. So the Daled Kosos each have its own or her own Amira, and that's exactly what he achieved. The only problem is that he gives up on, shall we say, a Tosefes HaMitzvah, to use the language of the Amudei Hod. What is that Tosefes HaMitzvah? That's called Yedei Cherus. He calls it a Chiyuv Nosaf. Nosaf means Tosefes. It's like a cherry on top. It's just an added embellishment to the mitzvah. Sheyishta oson mizugos derech cherus. And now at this point, we should press the return button, and we start again with Sheson v'Masachas. Now, here's where the Rosh makes a very sharp move. And that is that Sheson v'Masachas means that each member of the household drank his own kos. That wasn't apparent in any of the other commentaries, any of the Rishonim. So what happens here is that the basic chiyuv of the mitzvah is shtias daled kosos. And he drank daled kosos. Not only that, he even drank kosos mizugin, which means he has the kiyum of cherus. But then the Rosh says, lo kiyum din daled kosos. Wait a minute, you just finished telling me that he was Mekayim his chiyuv to drink 4 cups of wine. He drank 4 cups of wine. In fact, he drank yayin mazug even. And now you turn around and you say, lo kiyum es din daled kosos. What does that mean? And here's where the Amudei Hod, in his very, very unique presentation or understanding of the Rosh, introduces what I call the piggyback theory. What I mean by the piggyback theory is that you've got a basic mitzvah, basic kiyum, and then your markiv, you add on top a second kiyum. But that second kiyum can only be achieved if you have the first kiyum. So if you remember what we discussed before at the beginning of this presentation, the beginning paragraph, namely that yayin chai, you forfeit that tosefes kiyum of cherus. Now he's going to tell you that tosefes kiyum is koma bet, it is the piggyback on top of the basic kiyum. And the basic kiyum is daled kosos. And if you don't fulfill daled kosos, then you forfeit the kiyum of derech cherus. And in that sense, Sheson b'Vasachas is a heck of a lot worse than yayin mazug. I mean, yayin chai and not mazug. In yayin chai, he has the basic kiyum. He's lacking the tosefes kiyum of cherus through yayin mazug. That he forfeits, but he does have the basic kiyum of daled kosos. Why? Because each kos has its own bracha, and therefore its own identity, its own personality. But now he drinks them all b'vasachas without the seder habrachos. And there he forfeits the kiyum of daled kosos. And Memeli doesn't even have derech cherus. It's what we call haba hatalia. So what does he have then? Let's read it again. Sheson v'asachas, shalo al seder agoda. And here's where he introduces the Rosh in his Pirush on Shas, meaning
in the back of the Gemara, the regular
right in the back of the Gemara, as opposed to his chuvas. And it's basically identical with Rabbeinu David and the Rashbam and Kosos and so forth, that he drank it Shalom Seder HaBrachos. So what happens now? Yedei Yayin Yotza. Now let's underline those words. Yedei Yayin Yotza, because we don't. I'm going to try to prove to you in a minute that we don't understand what he means by Yedei Yayin Yotza. Because then he says Yedei Daled Kosos Lo Yotza, and then he's going to introduce the piggyback theory, the interdependence. Pirush. The Kiyam es Chiyuv Habsisi Shel Daled Kosos. He drank 4 cups of wine. Achlo Kiyam es Din Daled Kosos, which requires the personality that's generated by each bracha unto itself. Ubemela, he says, Lo Kiyam es Din Acherus, the Tosefes, because you can't have the Tosefes, you can't achieve the Tosefes without the Ikar. So now I'm stuck because I don't understand what does he mean, Yedei Yayin Yotza, which he identifies as the Chiyuv B'sisi, the Ikar and the basic. Well, What do you mean? How can you say such a thing? And in the same breath, you tell me that you weren't Yotzei the din of Daled Kosos, and therefore you don't even have the Tosefes of Cherus. So what do you have?
The Rosh has a three-part requirement: to drink yayin, to drink arba kosos, and to drink them becherus. And before, based on what we saw in the Gemara, that you could be the Gemara said yotze yedei yayin yatsa yedei cheru lo yatsa. We assume the third took out that it was a 2-part. So maybe if the Rosh thinks that there's 3 parts, then it would make sense to split it up like this.
Okay, so let's see if we could go with your approach. And what would be that middle tier, if you know what I mean, of Yedei Yayin Yotza? What does that mean, Yedei Yayin Yotza? Which he identifies as the Chiyuv B'sisi Shel Daled Kosos. So even if he drank them Shalom Seder HaBrachos without Amiras HaGodah, nevertheless he drank 4 cups of wine.
Well,
how do you read the next one?
I'll give it din arba kosos, right? So he says you can't have chirut without doing arba kosos ke'ochasa, and you could also have even more b'sisi than that. I think you could drink wine, but not drink 4 kosot of it. So if there were 3 kiyumim or 3 things that had right, then you could have wine, and then you get 4 kosot of wine, and then to drink them b'der chirut.
So there's some sort of a kiyum which he calls Yedei Yayin Yotza Shtias Arba Kosos Shel Yayin. Were there brachos? No brachos, but he drank 4 cups of wine, and that itself is he achieves the basic kiyum. On top of that, we're going to embellish that with Daled brachos and drinking them al Seder HaGodah. On top of that, we're going to embellish that with a kiyum of derech cherus, assuming that he drank yayin mozul.
Each their beito, most of for every yom, and then
Most of the whole
right.
And then can I give the? It's just that the language here is so tough. Read it again inside. He says, Yedei Yayin Yotza, Pirush, the Kiyam Eschiv Absisi shall, I guess, Shtia, I would add the word Shtia here, maybe a Shtias Daled Kosos, the Chayiv Lishtos Daled Kosos Yain, which he certainly did. So he's got that basic kiyum. We'll see about the fact that it's Yain Mozug in a second. Ach lo kiyum es din. You see, the language here is very, very tricky, or almost ambiguous. V'lo kiyum es din daled kosos. What's his din? All of a sudden he adds the word din. Din daled kosos. But he's saying that the din daled kosos is not the essence of the daled kosos.
Right.
Drinking 4 kosos is the essence, and that he had.
But not
But we need a din. It's like Reb Chaim talks about din kavana, which is pirush hamilos, right? So he says a din dalid kosos. Hainu hamira ala kos. See, I don't know, is he learning hamira ala kos the way the Brisker Rav was learning it in the Rambam? I'm not sure. I doubt it. Hamira ala kos. Hamatzricha shtia atz mishal kol echad ve'echad, right? Here's where the Rosh famously introduces the requirement that because it's the Leil HaSeder, he has every single person has to drink from the kos. In contrast to classic koshel bracha, where one person drinks from the kos and he's motzi everyone. And then he goes on. He says, "Ubishson chai the yotzi they daled kosos memel yotzi gam yedei chovas yayin the din yayin hu abasis." Okay, then. So I think this is where we'll stop for tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you are on the face of the earth. And I guess a grace yeshikoyach.
I'm sorry, I haven't seen the other guys.